Hi, this is Ryan from Dakota Angler and Outfitter, and today we're going to be tying a fly. It's a variation of a musky fly called the hang time. It's going to be a big big bait fishy looking pike fly, and something a little bit different for you to tie. The hook we're using is a Daiichi 2546 and a 2/0. It's the big wire so they can't bend the hooks on you. And then I'm using gel spun thread in 200 denier, just so I can really wrench down on some of the materials and make sure they're nice and secure. So you start your thread at the front of the hook. Sometimes this gel spun's a little tricky to cut if your scissors aren't exactly the sharpest. Then you take some super hair, or you can use slinky fiber, ice fur. There's a number of different materials you can use for the tail, but some sort of synthetic material for a tail. Either slinky fiber, ice fur, or super hair is probably your best options. Tie it down at the front. Bring it all the way to the back of the hook. Make sure you got it nice and secure. If you have any stray fibers, just pull them back and tie them down, because this fly isn't exactly a real precise tie. Take and cut that. Cut your tail whatever length you want, depending on what you're imitating. You can tie this fly to look like perch or bluegills or shad or trout or whatever the pike happened to be eating. Then you take some Flashaboo, or you can use Krennic flash or some sort of flash material, and you use a pretty good chunk of it. And what I do is I set it on the hook and I kind of push it around so it's going to kind of surround the tail, and do a couple of loose wraps just to get it cinched down. And then it kind of, if you push it, it'll kind of surround the whole tail that way. If you get these straight fibers, just pull them out. And trim those just a little bit longer. A little bit longer than the tail. So bring your thread just a little bit forward, a couple wraps, and then you're going to take bucktail. Well, actually, skip a step here. You're going to take your hackle. I'm going to use grizzly on the back of it. Just use some longer saddles. You're just going to put them down the sides to make some segmentation on it, and strip the bottom of it so you have somewhere to lash your thread down on. That. Flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Make sure it's about the same length. The fish probably don't care, but make your fly look a little bit better when it's all said and done. Tie that down. Make sure it sits down good, and bring your thread just a couple wraps forward. Now we're going to take bucktail and get a piece that's about, when it's squeezed together, about the size of two matchsticks probably. And you pull out the long fibers, and then you clean the bottom of it so you get all your short fibers out of there. And trim the bottom of it so it's flat, like this. And here's where it gets a little bit trickier, is you're going to tie this in backwards. You're going to tie it with the butts facing back, the tips facing forward. Same thing as you did with the flash. Kind of push it so it kind of surrounds the whole hook. Do a couple loose wraps, 2 or 3, and cinch down on it. And do a couple more tight wraps. Then you can trim this if you tied that in a little bit long like I did. It really doesn't matter. Why you tie it in facing forward is so you can get it so it flares. You get a big wide profile this way. If you tie it in facing straight backwards, you get kind of a skinny narrow profile rather than the big wide profile you're looking for. So make sure that's tied down good. take your right hand, make sure it's kind of evenly pushed around the hook, and flip it, push it all backwards, and it takes a few swipes usually to get it all facing the right direction. And once you get it going the right way, take your thread, do a couple wraps, make sure you got it held down nice and good. It's always a good idea to just put a little dot of super glue where you tie that down. It won't come apart that way. Do a couple more wraps over the top of it, and then bring your thread right in front of there. And tie down 2 more hackle fibers. I like to switch colors so all the hackle colors aren't the same. I'm going to use a barred yellow grizzly on this one, and then on the next one I'll alternate back to a regular grizzly. Just gives it a little bit more variation, so it's not all the same looking. You tie that down. Same thing as before. You get it so it's roughly the same length on the other side. Tie her down. Bring your thread in front, and then you're going to take another clump of olive bucktail, and you're going to do the same thing you did before. Kind of the key is get all the really short and the really long fibers out of it, so you have, a pretty well uniform length of materials rather than a bunch of short hairs and a bunch of long hairs, and it just makes the finished fly look a little bit better. Push it on there, push it around the hook, grab it with your left hand, 2 wraps, 3 wraps, tighten her down, do a couple more just for good measure. And this is where the gel spun thread really comes in handy, because you really need to get it so it's really snugly wrapped, secured around the hook, because otherwise your fly just isn't going to hold up. But same thing as before, you can trim these up if you want. If not, it just kind of flares the bucktail out a little more, depending on the profile you want to get. If you want to get a little bit wider profile, you can leave these long, but it's really not a crucial step. Then you push it all back again. Same thing, it takes a couple tries to get everything going the right direction. Something like that. Sometimes it takes a couple tries to get it up on there. There you go. You're kind of going for the right shape, like that there is flared out too far. So it's it all comes down to where you tie it down at. So I'm looking about right here, I think. Something like that. Tie down a couple more hackle fibers on the sides. Same thing, so they're about the same length, so they match. A lot of repetition. There's only a couple steps in this fly, but you do them several times just to make sure you get everything tied down how it needs to be. And then we're going to switch to another color here. We're going to switch to a yellow bucktail. And you can do this fly in any number of colors. You can do it in a rainbow trout pattern, or a perch, or a shiner, or a bluegill, or what have you. It's all the same steps. You just switch the materials on it. And this front clump we're not going to make quite as big because we're running out of room on the front of this hook. You got to leave yourself about 1/3 of the hook to work with on the front to make your head. But we get the yellow bucktail off the skin and trim the back of it so it's flat again. Same thing, tie it in backwards. Like that. 3 loose wraps and tighten her down. And sometimes when it kind of sits on top of the hook like that, after you tie it, you can just kind of twist it right around the hook. Trim these. Flip it all back again, same as you've been doing. And tie it down the same as you tied everything else down. Get a couple good wraps on there and throw a dot of Zap-A-Gap on there. If you get any stray fibers like these, you can just trim them off. And then you're going to take a couple big webby saddle feathers. Pick 2 pretty chunky ones for this. Strip the ends of them. Trim them, tie them down by the tips, and kind of taper this down if you can. And make a few wraps with this, just palmer it up to the thread. Tie that down. Cut it off. Fold them all back. Lash them down so they're all kind of facing towards the back of the fly. And then the next step of this fly, and the last step, is we're going to use this laser dub. We're using a sculpin olive this time, but again, you can tie this fly in white or whatever color head and body you want. I mean, hackles, flash, tail, it doesn't matter. Just tie it in whatever color scheme you like. You're going to take a clump of this, kind of organize it into a oval shape, set it on top of the hook, do a couple of loose wraps on it, and then do the same thing on the bottom of the hook. Kind of want to get it in that shape, kind of a little bit elongated oval shape, and tie it down right in the center of that. Do a couple loose wraps. Tighten both of those down, sneak your thread back through there, push it back, and pull out. You'll get a few stray fibers, it'll just pull out with it. and push it all back again. And we got room for one more clump on the front of this one. And on some flies you might only have room for one clump depending on how long you make the body, and some of them you might have room for 3. It just depends on how long you make the body on it. Usually it ends up being about 2, but again it depends on how you want your body and everything to look. Tie it down on the bottom. Couple loose straps, tight wrap, pull it back. Sneak it through there. Fold it all back. Do a couple wraps in front, make sure you got it secured. And then do your whip finish in front. Doing a couple is probably a good idea on a big pike fly like this. Trim your thread off. Pull out all the stray fibers that just stuck to the rest of the dubbing. Then kind of fold it into a definite upper and lower clump like this. And this is where you're going to put the eyes on it. So right now it's kind of got a little mohawk effect going on. And then you can use whatever eyes you want, but make sure you get the big, like the 3/8 inch side. I'm going to use the oval pupil 3Ds. The color really doesn't matter, I don't think. It's all a personal preference thing. And this is kind of the key. You flip it on the side and lay quite a bead of super glue on there. You don't want these eyes coming off. They're kind of a crucial part of the fly. And you set your eye on top of there and squeeze it. And really squeeze it so it stays on there, because otherwise you don't want the ice falling off of it. And do the same thing on the other side. Lay quite a bead of super glue on there. Peel off an eye. Set it on there and just squeeze them. The glue will soak all the way through to the hook. Make sure it's nice and secure on there. Something like that, and fold it all back in. So you get kind of that big wide bait fish. I mean, a lot of the lakes and ponds around here have bluegills and crappies and various sunfish, so they get kind of this big wide profile like this rather than a really slender conventional bait fish. So this fly keeps its shape in the water and should be pretty darn good for some of those pike. If you need any materials for this fly, you can go on our website at www.flyfishsd.com. And thanks for watching.